Chapter 3, the Symbolic Code. This business that we are in is the business of theatre. Having argued for the existence of the violence-seeking impulse and interpreted various points in history to demonstrate how morality may curb the acceptable expression of the impulse, I shall now show how we gratify the impulse through understanding symbolism. I begin this with Erving Goffman's work on symbolic interactionalism, then to Foucault's idea of humiliation, dominance and submission, in light of Nietzsche's Power Discourse ideology. To understand the symbolism of wrestling and what it presents its audience with, there must be universal codes of semantics. For example, the meaning of actions. The meaning of a symbol or sign is understood by more than one person to have the same meaning. Obviously, the biggest way we understand meaning is through codes. The largest of these is our language system, a way to communicate meanings through interpreting symbols. Symbols in a certain order are interpreted as meaning. There is a problem with the idea that non-linguistic symbols have meaning, because often the same symbol can have more than one meaning, in which case one must note that symbols by themselves mean nothing, and more that any individual can add their own meaning to a symbol as long as it is done universally from that point on. It's important to note that without interpretation of symbols in the correct way, generally accepted, one can be misled as to the meaning. In professional wrestling, as is stated in the next chapter, since there are single acts of symbolism where there may be a myriad of interrelated semantics for the audience, the commentator's role of ascribing the correct meaning to the symbol becomes paramount for true understanding. When I mention correct meaning here, I mean that for a single and universal understanding, there can be only one meaning per symbol. It is up to the industry to dictate to us which meaning they wish to ascribe to the physical act. It is through the interaction with other groups of people and acting out roles that we discover society's signs and symbols. For Goffman, without a doubt, all interactions seek to clarify ways of being for the individual and allow presentation of knowledge, or supposed knowledge, to be tested by evaluating the feedback of others. This portrayal is the sign vehicle. He continues to say that in all the roles we play, the messages we give out enter a complex web of defensive practices and protective practices. This keeps the meaning alive and viable within whichever groups the individual associates themselves with. Naturally, just the group can say quite a lot about the wishes of the individual. Certain symbols and meanings have come up so many times in the past that social groups have formed around the meaning rather than the people. For example, groups that everyone recognises because the meaning comes before the individuals are groups like the punks or the goths. In professional wrestling, the meanings are dictated to us by the industry through the commentators. The point to remember at this stage must be that all individuals within the group interpret the dominant meaning the same, but apply it in a different way. So the stereotype that is defined as the outsider's view on the dominant meaning in a group, where the meaning comes before the individual, is never truly applicable because of the individual and their own interpretation. Dictation of meaning via commentators in wrestling is not misuse of symbolism by the industry, but the commentary is a necessity for understanding so many things. It provides a semantic attachment to a physical token, and it enables the audience to witness an event and ascribe en masse the same meaning. It also provides an escape route by allowing interaction with symbolism that represents behaviour that society usually forbids. In the Nietzschean view, the world and interactions work through chains of power. Power is given and received depending on your status in society. Each individual is held in a complex web of hierarchical power discourses that represent their relationships between family members, friends, and people in their profession. Each individual must respect the power chain and operate within it where appropriate, even when this calls for submission. In society, this order is hierarchical. A person answers to his boss and must act subservient. Often in professional wrestling, this power flow is reversed. We often see such wrestlers as Hulk Hogan challenge Mr. Vince McMahon, who is the very epitome of power in sports entertainment, being portrayed as virtually the sole owner of the company. One may very much enjoy the embarrassment caused when wrestlers such as Steve Austin manage to beat such bosses as Eric Bischoff. It may be escapist because we cannot reverse this power flow in everyday life. How we might like to teach our bosses a lesson. This display of power discourse, reversed, might allow us to interact with the symbolism and imagine ourselves doing as the wrestlers do, acting as an escapist, cathartic vent. For Nietzsche, the acquisition of power is the prime factor that motivates all the activities of life. This means that life is meaningful only on account of struggle, where the struggle is those with power succeeding over the weak. Professional wrestling deals entirely with themes of power in this respect because it's about submission and dominance. It illustrates this through symbols from simulated violence. Nietzsche talks about the Übermensch or Superman. Although for this philosopher this is referred to more as an aspiration, if it were possible to create the Superman with specific relation to the power discourse, the professional wrestlers themselves may be a good symbol. It is possible to go to the ring and see most of Nietzsche's philosophies enacted, and this is something that can be done in order to gratify the impulse. There are alternative arenas, such as the power discourses concerning graphic death in horror films. Certainly, professional wrestling does give out these sorts of discourses of power through its symbolism. The acts of wrestling, which are allowed free expression, are suppressed in real life by the authority of morality, particularly religious morality that concerns itself not with power, but with the giving up of power to deities. In this respect, the deities hold the power. This is inclusive of power over death, and of the time each person is to die. It also means that people holding such a view will live as that deity has instructed. In the case of Christian teaching, and many others, this is peacefully, unless called on to fight for injustice or blasphemy. Yet this in itself, viewed from Nietzsche, is a form of power discourse ideology, in that it displays submission to a higher being. There is still power discourse being played. Religious answer can be simply put as, morality is not a weapon of the weak, as Nietzsche thinks. No, morality has authority, it is the curbing of the expression. However, the expression itself has a subversive power that clearly aligns itself to a web-like network of power discourses that deal with dominance and the acquisition of power. Nietzsche shows there are power discourses that we enjoy opposing morality and society that could be well applied to modern expressions of the VSI. Mazer, a sports ethnographer who studied professional wrestling, suggests that there is an issue of power at stake in the relationship between pro wrestlers and spectators. She argues that wrestlers take their cues from audience demands, as if the audience dictates the performance. Note here that Mazer assigns the authority to the audience and not the performers. The power discourse between participant and watcher in this case actually flows from the audience. This is true to the extent that wrestlers do try to program their matches to be even more exciting, to display even more dominance and submission, and the gaps between the two break down or appear more stark. The consequences are bigger, connecting the storylines and the idea of winner-takes-all matches. For example, the outcome of one such match between Kurt Angle and Edge. The loser lost all his hair.